Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. Today's programme is all about innovative solutions for urban living and enhancing quality of life in our cities. First, we'll meet the founder of a super smart development company.
There's a problem in the world where people are not connecting enough. I think it's really important to continue to make efforts to bring us back to humanity, to have human interaction. And so Urby was really where people would connect with each other, feel better, and effectively create community.
And later, we'll meet the founder of a compact cargo bike company that's reshaping the way Switzerland rides.
There are a lot of people, they went around with folding bicycles. And on the other side, you have like the huge cargo bicycles. But in between there, I think, is the sweet spot for Flinc.
This is The Entrepreneurs with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. David Barry is the founder and CEO of Urby, a real estate development company that blends apartment living with the hospitality flair of boutique hotels. Since launch in 2014, Urby's aimed to close the gap between traditional residential life and the personalised experience of high-end accommodation. Today, Urby boasts 6 open properties in the US in cities like Dallas and New York, and there are 9 more in active development, including in Washington, D.C.'s Dynamic Yards neighbourhood. Beyond Urby, Barry is a prominent venture investor backing lifestyle brands like Peloton. He's also been involved in iconic properties such as New York's Chelsea Hotel and London's Chiltern Firehouse, just steps from Monocle's HQ, Midori House. I'm delighted to have David here with us today. David, a warm welcome. It feels like this conversation's long overdue, not just because of our proximity to the Chiltern Firehouse, but because so much of what you focus on, neighbourhood building, placemaking, great hospitality, aligns with Monocle's ethos. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that is true. I've been a big fan of Monocle for a long time, for real, and was lucky enough to be involved in the development of Chiltern Firehouse. So I've been in this neighborhood many times and have walked by your cafe and your offices, but have actually never been in here. So I'm really happy to be here this morning.
Well, and tell me about how much better we're getting, to generalise, at being a bit more thoughtful in terms of putting these kind of neighbourhoods together. Because you stroll down Chiltern Street, so different than what it was like 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Do we have more intentional developers? Are we a bit more joined up, or what's the voguish word, holistic, in terms of how we actually think about integrating brands, great development, responsible kind of city planners even? Are we nudging in the right direction?
I don't know if as a society we're nudging in the right direction. I hope so. I think what we see here on Chiltern Street is a combination of the attention to detail, commitment, passion of Chiltern Firehouse, of Monocle. And I think in that instance, it leads this street and kind of like the inspiration, the mood, the values, I guess, of it. I think, you know, when I look at getting involved with projects, and I've been involved in a lot of them, I really think it's everybody's responsibility to take small steps to make the world a better place. I think conscious capitalism, I call it. And I don't know if the world is bending in that direction or not. I'm doing my part, as you guys are doing your part, to get us there.
You've got a pretty consistent track record. Let's just talk a bit. We'll come to Urby in a minute, but some of these projects, obviously Chiltern Firehouse people will know, but amazing brands, Standard or Peloton, other things you've done in a slightly different kind of sector. Mm-hmm. Are there uniform features, David, that grab you, that make you think, yeah, this is something that I want to get involved in? Again, do the right projects find the right people, or do good people make projects work? How does it? Oh, I guess maybe it's always a bit of everything, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. You ask so many interesting questions. If there's a through line, I think passion, values of the founders, and sometimes I'm the leader or driver of that passion, depends on the business, but other times I think I'm really inspired working with people that are passionate, that care about, not just care about the world, but have a set of values, whatever that's driving what they're doing. And it's not just money. It's not just finances. I think we can talk about that for a second, because I think in this world of capitalism and money moving, it's often easy to lose sight of that there really are people and values and products behind this. And so for me, it really starts out with that. And so often that expresses in hospitality for me, and it's an area that I have a lot of familiarity with and have had a lot of experience with. But it can also run through other brands, Peloton. It could be Pryor Travel, which is David Pryor, and kind of editorial experiential mix, which I think is doing some really interesting things to change the world as well. And so I'm passionate about that. And sometimes I would say, to answer that question, the right projects find me. I think I put that into the universe. And so my weeks, often a week doesn't go by without somebody, pitching me something. And by pitching me, I say like getting me involved in an idea. And I think part of it can be financial, but often it's also that they like my guidance or spirit that kind of goes through that. So I don't know if that answers that.
I think it does. I think it does. Well, let's look at then Urby as an example. Take me back to the start.
Yeah.
So you've identified a couple of threads already, value set, opportunity, of course. How did you, before we get into that, for the uninitiated, what exactly does Urby do? Let's start with that first.
Urby is a fusion. It's homes, it's apartments. Let's start there. But it's really infusing what I call hospitality, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, into the apartment world. And I think that apartments have been an industry that are, of course, incredibly necessary. It's basic, it's vital, it's where we live, right? We need a roof over our head. But I think often that piece of the real estate industry has been dominated by financial interests and generic values, if you will, just commoditization of space. And I've always been a curious person. I've always been super interested in culture. I've traveled a lot. I was a history major at Columbia. I went to law school, and I'm really interested in culture and how that shaped hospitality and learning from some of. So I started out developing apartments first. And so I understood the mechanics of that. And as I was able to get into some hospitality projects, Urby was kind of an aha moment where I realized that I've seen all this amazing attention to detail, attention to hospitality in what we traditionally call hospitality or hotel projects, where they're able to connect people emotionally to the built space environment and to what they're doing. And I saw very little of that in residential, or at least transient residential, which is what apartments' purpose is. And so I really set out to take the model of residential living and what that means to people. And it's different than staying in a hotel, but what that means to people, and discovering touch points where I could connect them to the space and to the community better. And you might ask, why, right, would I do that? But I feel like there's a problem in the world where people are not connecting enough. We rely too much on social media, its new friend AI, right? These have been these trends that have been going on for 20 years, really. And I think it's really important to continue to make efforts to bring us back to humanity, to have human interaction. And so Urby was really an attempt to, at scale, create product in a transient residential environment where people would connect with each other, feel better about each other, and effectively create community.
Now, I imagine that when you're looking at projects like that, other partners and stakeholders would say, David, this sounds kind of nuanced, which generally a lot of decision makers don't like.
Yeah.
Sounds complicated, and it sounds like it's going to cost more than doing it by numbers. When you have those conversations, which I'm assuming you probably did, is that when we get David Barry doubling down and becoming, ever more stubborn and obstinate about sticking to the principles, or do you have to rein back? How complex is it? Tell me about those tension moments during the process.
Yeah, that's interesting. So at the core, I try to keep things simple. So I think hotels are very complex organizations to run. There's a lot of labor, a lot of moving parts, from reservations to room service to cleaning. We're primarily overwhelmingly unfurnished apartments. And we do have some pillars of how I set up the connection and the community around hospitality. But first and foremost, to answer your question, I really keep them simple. I'm very aware with my background in hotels of not getting too complex with this. And so whether it comes to the hardware, building the building itself, or the software, meaning how many people and how many things we're trying to do at once, I'm really aware of keeping that simple and making improvements, but not trying to go too far where the point you brought up can become an issue, because it is true that in something like residential, affordability is a big factor, and you have to make sure that you're always paying attention to the bottom line, not just for the profit that a Brookfield or a Blackstone or whoever's involved may want to see in addition to an entrepreneur, but also so that you're doing your part to provide housing, and housing that people can afford, right? So it's not affordable housing, but it's affordable housing, right, in a sense. And so I have had those conversations, but I've been able to prove out that with just spending a fraction more, I mean, we're talking a few percent more in hard costs, it doesn't have to cost a lot more, because what I'm doing is more akin to kind of quick casual, not like luxury Michelin star. If I was to make a, so it's not what Chiltern Firehouse is doing. It's more what Standard was doing at its core in hotels. And so I really keep to, I guess I'd say, simplicity and stick to the purpose, which is building community, but not spending too much and taking the cost basis away.
And it's about enduring value generation, right? And we always have this conversation about, sustainability. It's not just about materials, but it's about, first of all, you've got to have the business still got to be there in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right?
Yeah, that's
you
right.
can't have any conversation about long-termism or longevity without having a robust business that sticks to its principles.
That's right.
Talk to us a bit about Urby by scale. A listener might be like, okay, I know David's work, and I think, I know a little bit. I understand what he's saying. What's the scale? What's the ambition here? Maybe is it a couple of specific projects or recent investments that can paint a bit of a picture about how the abstract theory comes into practice, if you like?
Yeah. So the scale is fairly large in that, well, let me define that. We have about 8 properties open right now, which contain about 4,000 units, 4,000 apartments, and have another 5 properties underway with about another 4,000 units in those. So the scale of these is larger than a hospitality project often, in that I think communities can handle more scale in a sense. I'm going to point out one thing, which is people move into buildings often once a year. They might stay for a few years. Hotels, of course, are turning things over very fast. And so in this instance, I think scale helps to provide energy and vitality. So the scale of the projects is pretty large. Geographically, New York metro area is where we have our base, but we're in Philadelphia, opening in DC soon, have something underway in Miami, in Dallas. And so geographically, I've expanded into some other markets in the United States that have growth and some cultural capital around them. In terms of my ambition, I don't look at it geographically necessarily. I did expand geographically and was really interested to see how it would translate into other markets. And I think that was a really interesting learning experience. But for me, more importantly, I'm focused on innovation and how to make the projects better all the time. And so even things like scale, I'm reevaluating that all the time. And I think when I started out, I think scale was very important to me. As I've moved down the road with this, I think there's a place where there's a kind of a sweet spot, which maybe when I'm doing communities of 1,000 units or 1,500 units, that's on the large side. And I think the scale for a particular project might be from 200 to 400 apartments. I also like to put multiple ones within an overall larger metro area. So I think that they really are micro communities, and London probably has, for instance, 10 different submarkets that you could put a product like this in and attract different people, because people are attracted to submarkets for specific reasons. And so
it's complicated. You make it sound simple. Well, just on that point, it struck me as interesting. You used the word, how does it translate? And I often ask entrepreneurs who have footprints in different cities within the market or globally, how fluently their kind of working language travels between markets, right? And obviously one of the things that defines great and innovative placemaking is the interaction with the locale, right? So if you're in DC or Metro New York or Dallas, how much do you have to be acutely aware that you need to, not deviate from the fundamentals, but kind of deviate from the fundamentals, right? Is that complicated?
Yeah, that is an astute point, and it's about fundamental human values. I think are, there's values that are fairly consistent, and then there's other values between cultures, even cultures in the United States, between Dallas and New York. There's a lot of differences culturally, and of course in Europe you have that. And so I think It's a little bit of a learning process, but the place within the community of the building that I'd probably most express local culture, first and foremost, would be around the cafe in the lobby. So one of the touch points we use to drive connection is to integrate a cafe in our lobby, something that I've pulled from the boutique hotel world, right? I've spent a tremendous amount of time with Andre Balazs on many different projects, and it's like going to Harvard of hospitality with him, right? The attention and focus to detail and the thought that goes behind it, and the energizing of the ground space is something where I use that to plug into local customs or cuisines or vibes. And so we often look for a local or regional operator to be our partner in that. Something like fitness would be a little bit more of a universal value, I think, for the market that we're going after. So we're always going to build a large fitness space, do lots of good programming, and I think that's a bit more universal. Similarly, we pay a lot of attention to the outdoor areas and how we're going to create something that allows people a respite from the urban jungle, so to speak, that most of us are located in. And I think that's a little bit more universal too. So depending on which part of the project we're looking at, we're kind of weighing those two things.
I'm going to break with my normal structure.
Yeah.
Dad, I want to do a couple of quick fire questions.
Sure.
So you have to try and be succinct.
Okay.
If you can. Give me a market that a fantasy market. It doesn't even have to be pragmatic.
Yep.
Where you'd like to do a project anywhere. Could be
Mexico
anywhere.
City.
Oh, so he was fast, straight in there. May I ask why? Just why not? I guess it's it.
Giant, vibrant city, tons of creativity. I think Mexico's in a really cool geographical spot, and I think it would translate well.
Agreed. Gaining inspiration, right? Okay, you're going to be in a hospitality project, or maybe you see maybe a rival operator and you think, this is an interesting thing I hadn't thought of. But what about outside of the professional realm? Where does David get his inspiration from?
I love to travel. That's one thing. I absolutely love to travel. I get inspired by talking to other entrepreneurs, being able to learn from them and mentor them. And so often it's a two-way relationship, many times where they think I'm mentoring them, but really they're providing all this inspiration and advice to me as well.
Look, we're talking for radio, for a podcast, right?
Yeah.
You know a thing or two about podcasting, right? Why are podcasts a good way to frame an interesting conversation? I should have the answer to this.
You should have the answer. I want
to know what you think.
They're off the cuff. I think they're human and they are rather bite-sized. I think they respond well to the world that is, people are craving about reality and unvarnished. And so when I even look at things like social media, what used to exist, what exists now, I think there's a real attraction to like reality. And I think podcasts are really good at creating that in an unproduced way.
Can I ask you about wrestling?
Yeah,
do you mind me asking about that?
Yeah, no.
Because you're a bit of a kind of legend in your own time. Am I right in saying that here in London in 2012, were you kind of like the chef de mission? I don't know what they call it.
I was a team leader for the U.S. Olympic wrestling team in London for the 2012 Olympics with my best friend, Mike Novogratz. And we got to march in the opening ceremonies. And really that position was for the 4 years before the Olympics, supporting financially, mentoring, things like that, the wrestling team as it was preparing for those Olympics. It was an amazing experience.
Now tell me, why is wrestling a good... What's so great about it as a preparation for success in business, as a good thing for camaraderie, community? Because it's not really such a thing
over here
here in the UK.
Yeah.
So you can probably tell I'm coming from a place of some ignorance. Tell me about it, because I know you were. I don't know, what is it, like a kind of all-American when you were at college?
I was a wrestler in high school. I was a wrestler in college and had won some awards there. All Ivy, things like that, and really. To me, wrestling, like I credit wrestling with creating grit, determination. I mean, there's a saying in the wrestling world, which is like, once you've wrestled, everything else is easy. And that's true. It really builds a resilience. It teaches young men to be able to accept, not just chase success, but accept failure. In a way, it connects your mind to your body. So I think all sports are great. Wrestling happened to be the sport that I got attracted to and was passionate about, but it's a huge building block of who I am as a person. I think no matter how things are going with business, how hard things get, how many things are incoming, it always gives me this reserve to step back and just, remember that for real. It was nothing I've ever done since was as hard as what it was like to be a wrestler in those years.
I love that. I love that. It's great.
Yeah.
Do you think that are we a bit, as a society, I don't know why this strikes me as interesting, are we a bit over cautious about exposing our kids to defeat, to the reality that life is hard, and actually you may fail as much, you may fail more than succeed, and that's fine, and you'll get through it. Are we all getting a bit out of touch with some of these realities? Do we need to reconnect a little bit with some of the, because it's a very immediate reality, isn't it? As you said, it's quite stark.
Yeah.
Are we a bit too, what is it? Do we kind of wrap our
Pampered.
kids up a bit? Yeah, in cotton wool a little bit.
Yeah, I think we are a bit too pampered. I think that it's important to allow kids to take risk. It's hard to do as a parent. I was a kid once. I'm a parent now. My kids are grown and they're all really great. But I think it's really important to restrain your urge to, as a parent, first of all, and as a society, to coddle or protect, because, the world is random. It can be crazy. Like bad things can happen. We hope good things happen. But no, I do think that. And I think sports are really one of the few places that, we talked about wrestling, but one of the few places where children get to put themselves out, get to expose themselves, get to understand what it's like to fall down, to be hurt, to fail in front of people, right? To deal with that defeat, that shame, and be able to process that and move through that. And to be a successful human being, you have to be able to take risk. You have to be able to fail. And people that are afraid to do that, I don't think they're going to achieve fulfillment or full dreams, in a sense. So we're holding our people back if we're not allowing them to take that risk.
I love that, David. Right. I often ask this question of guests I'm fortunate enough to chat to on this programme, sort of the ripple dissolve. We're sat around this table, David, in 5 years' time. Mm-hmm. What are we chatting about? This is not an easy question, and it's not it's not the quick fire round. You can be more thoughtful on this one.
What are we chatting about in my life or in the world?
If we were literally in these very chairs in 5 years' time, what do you think we would be chatting about? A wry smile is playing across David's face. I don't know where he's going to go with this.
Well, wow, that is a tough question.
I'm in the tough question asking business, David.
Personally, I would like to have made a difference in that's such a tough question.
It's all right.
I'm like, I guess I would have to, would like to look back and really have made a difference, had people in the residential space copying the small steps that I'm making. I'd be proud of what I've done. I don't look at scale. I don't have an answer for that in terms of scale or how many things I've done, because I don't think about that. I really think about the leadership or the small steps I can take to influence the world of development into a better place. For me personally, I really like mentoring people. I like doing new projects. I'm kind of looking for the next kind of flip with Urby in terms of, do we do a little bit of placemaking outside of the cities? I think there's some really interesting things happening with millennials coming into their 30s and babies, education, community in another form. And so I'm really looking forward to evolving in a direction like that.
Exciting, right?
Yeah, no, it is. I love new ideas. For me, when it's the same thing repeated too many times, it gets boring, and I like to always be evolving. And that's one thing I've really taken from hospitality and my experience in all these entrepreneurial ventures.
That was David Barry, the founder and CEO of Urby, and you can find out more about the business by heading to urby.com. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Now, friend of Monocle, Markus Freitag, is the founder of Flinc, a Zurich-based compact cargo bike company created to address everyday commuting challenges that's steering the Swiss cycling scene in a fresh direction. We caught up with Markus in Istanbul recently at Monocle's Quality of Life conference to hear more about the company's ambitious plans. Markus began by telling our Hassan Anderson about the start of the journey.
Usually I see myself as the target group, so I have a nice position so I can solve my problems to increase my quality of life. So I developed now a bicycle which solves my whole year everyday cycling around the city problems. And that means it's a compact cargo bicycle. So far, I didn't realize that there is a market, but I hope there is one. So since I do the products for myself, I think cyclists have a lot of bicycles, but they never have the right bicycle with them because the day starts like that and it's ending in a different way. Maybe you find yourself with 3 tall shopping bags in the evening. So therefore I thought, okay, let's invent a bicycle which is the right one for every day. It doesn't matter if it's raining or sunny, if you have a lot of cargo or not. So that's why I believe there is a market for Flinc.
Aside from people who cycle, did you find a surprising group of people who use this product that you weren't expecting?
Yes, I think there are a lot of people like me. They went around with folding bicycles, which is a very clever bicycle. But once it comes to the cargo solution, maybe it's not the solution anymore. And on the other side, you have like the huge cargo bicycles. But once you don't have to bring 2 or 3 children to the daycare, it's maybe a little bit too much of cargo. And in between there, I think, is the sweet spot for Flinc. Also a weekend trip to the suburbs, or you can put it easily into the train because it's not that big. It has the size like a BMX. And also people in the train, they are more happy if you come with a smaller bicycle. If there is a huge or a normal city bike, they don't really like to have you as well in the train.
Did people react quite a lot when you said you wanted to start a company like this? Was there a lot of pushback? Did people denounce the idea?
Yeah, these days when you tell someone that you start a bicycle business, they ask you, oh, okay, it has to be an electric bike, and Flinc is not an electric bike. And then it's quiet for a moment, and after a while they tell you, oh, I love it because I want to go on a real bicycle. And also the thing about where to plug in your bicycle and stuff like that, and does the technique works in about 5 or 10 years. So therefore we came up with a very low-tech solution, and once you need electricity, as I already mentioned, you jump into the next train and that's it.
How much about your own life day to day gave rise to the idea of Flinc?
I jump into the train every day with my bicycle because I jump off the train today at station A, tomorrow at station B, maybe in the evening I drop in at station C. So I need to have like 4 different bicycles in every station, or I take the bicycle with me. And yeah, I'm too lazy to fold my bike all the time. So that's why I invented this small compact cargo bicycle.
I'm getting more and more tempted by a Flinc myself as we progress with this interview. A couple more questions. What are you working on next?
You know, the idea was not to reinvent the wheel or the bicycle. It's there for about 150 years. So we just assembled the best parts we could find. And next, I think, is the focus on this cargo platform. So there is just a small rack in the front, but a heavy and a strong one. So there you can place bigger boxes, smaller boxes. Once you have a raincoat with you or a helmet and the lock and all the stuff you have with you as an everyday cyclist, you just put it into this front box. It's like your cockpit for your daily commute. And some people would like to lock this stuff because you don't want to take a wet raincoat to the next meeting. So you want to lock it at your bicycle. Or maybe even better, you want to use it to keep your bicycle dry while you're joining the meeting. And once you're getting out of the meeting, you just uncover your dry bicycle. And I think that's where we want to focus on, to find the right bags, the right features to make it really easy to have like the whole year, nice weather or even a rainy day, making comfortable for your everyday commute.
In terms of the future, what are you most excited about? Future plans for areas of growth or regions that you want to expand in?
Yeah, I look really forward to have at least in every train a wagon where is a green door where you enter with your bicycle, and maybe there is the red door where you leave the train. So there's one flow and it's very easy to jump in and out a train with a bicycle. For sure you stand next to your bicycle. You don't need a chair, so you can also squeeze the cyclists a little bit together. But that would be a very good feeling to know each train which is arriving has a space which is functionally for cyclists.
Across this interview, you've talked a lot about the relationships between cyclists and then the trains they get. Do you think the future for transport is about that relationship in terms of making sure we stay more green, or even more efficient?
I think so. I think, if there is more space for bicycles in cities are getting quieter, greener, more space, more quality of life. And I strongly agree in this future picture, like car-free cities.
That was Markus Freitag, the founder of Flinc. You can find out more by heading to flinccycles.com. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do look out for Eureka, available every Friday. The programme was produced by Laura Kramer with audio editing by Jack Dewars. You can listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com. That's where you can also subscribe to Monocle magazine and read more about better businesses every month. You can also follow us and catch up with the archive wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with the team, email Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.